what is being done or not being done with regards to students who support Hamas studying in Israeli universities?
There were two developments this past week that were greatly troubling. In one instance, at the University of, let me go back 1 second. After those three woke presidents of Ivy League universities in the United States, University of Pennsylvania, MIT, and Harvard, gave that absolutely disgraceful presentation of their woke philosophy in Congress, saying that, well, anti-Semitism, may not violate their code of conduct. It's all contextual. There was a joint letter signed by the presidents of Israeli universities condemning that, and that it was not acceptable, and etc. And it reminded me of, the old expression, the lady doth protest. Well, this past week, there were a number of Arab university students at the University of Haifa who had written some really horrible things on October 7th and October 8th about how happy they were about the massacre and how they wished it could have come sooner and that it could have been bloodier. I mean, it was really bad. So they were, subject to disciplinary action on the part of the university to expel them. Seems reasonable enough. The university decided otherwise, and they're letting them back in. They haven't recanted. They haven't expressed remorse. They haven't apologized. And they are not outliers, by the way, as far as the Arab Student Association is concerned in the University of Haifa. So who is on top of all of this? Why, it's the president of the University of Haifa. Now, I could say he's a hypocrite for having, chided his equals in the United States, but it's no surprise. Personally, I think that the president of University of Haifa and everyone associated with this matter should be fired forthwith, fired outright. And in contrast to the reprehensible behavior of the University of Haifa, we have in contrast the Ben Gurion University of the Negev, where they had a similar situation with a bunch of Arab students that wrote equally egregious things about how happy they were about October 7th. But in their case, the university is insisting on disciplining them. And I think we're going to see these vermin expelled from Ben Gurion. This was the correct thing to do. Then the craziest thing of all came about, where 11 of the Arab security prisoners who were released in the course of the hostage negotiations with Hamas have been readmitted to their respective universities. And not only that, but they're being given help in making up for the lost time that they suffered as a result of their security infractions. And this includes psychological help and not only academic help. And who's managing this is the Ministry of Education. I am sorry. The only thing I can say to that is, have we all gone stark, bloody mad? In the first place, if we were going to release...
Unfortunately, the answer to that question is in the
is yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. This can't stand. This is a Likud ministry. If we were going to release...
that statement is correct technically. But what all of us must surely have realized by now is that the way things have developed since the essentially over the last 40 years, and more specifically over the last 30 years, since the Oslo Accords in this country, there has been a coup, a slow, deliberate, well-planned, and very well executed coup. The head of this junta is Aharon Barak, former president of the Supreme Court. He's the guru. He's the Admor, some people would say in Hebrew, like a Hasidic Rebbe. And they have essentially created a system of governance in this country which is unknown in any other state on the planet. Essentially, this is a juristocracy or something like that. In other words, the government officials, ministers, even the prime minister, they have very little power at all.
Digging down, you have the top of this juristocracy, of course, but flowing down from that, you have the various legal advisors, starting, of course, with the attorney general.
And it's all part of the same junta.
Well, yes, but it's a well-structured organization that they have, which is, in a short word, called the deep state. And they have their equivalents in the military and in the press. They're in all three areas. And when you look at something like the Ministry of Education, who actually decided that these people should be allowed back into the universities that they were expelled from, and when they were arrested? This is a question. Who started this? Who signed off on it? And why aren't they being held accountable? Personally, if they wanted to release these 11 individuals in exchange for hostages, we never should have allowed them to walk the streets of Israel. They should have been deported to Gaza. But having made that mistake, I think that this further insult to our senses, our intelligence, where they're welcomed back into the universities that they were removed from for their security breaches and given remedial help and then psychological help because they spent some time in prison. I think because of that, somebody's head has to roll. I'm sorry to say this, but somebody has to be punished for this stupid, I would call it treasonous decision in the Ministry of Education. And honestly, I think that if half the bureaucrats in the ministry were fired or basically just given a long vacation, told not to come back to work, grandfathered, so to speak, we would all be off. We're better off for it. But as far as this decision, somebody has to take responsibility for it.
I have a better suggestion, which I've been saying for years. The Ministry of Education needs to be closed, needs to be shut down. It is perhaps the most pernicious, dangerous, destructive ministry in the country. It achieves nothing good by all international standards, by the way. And
they've succeeded in dumbing down the student population in Israel, literally dumbing it down.
And also they have succeeded largely in removing the last vestiges of Jewish identity and any awareness of anything to do with Judaism.
Whenever they want to cut anything, whenever they want to cut anything in the Ministry of Energy, they always cut anything having to do with Jewish history.
The Ministry of Education,
or faith. And the worst part about it is
you meant the Ministry of Education, right?
Right, education. Yes. I would not mind if the students exiting from high school were Jewishly ignorant, because then at least there would be a possibility of instructing them later on. But that's not what has happened in the Ministry of Education at all. what's happened is they've turned out apikorsim because of the influence of the liberals, the reform or deformed movement, as I call it. If you look at I've asked a lot of MKs to look into this, and not one of them will do it. There were supposed to be bids on organizations that would be providing Jewish education, so to speak, to the various secular schools. There was no competition, none. The liberals got right in. They have their own teachers. They have their own programs. They have their own agenda. And it runs counter to everything most people would accept as Jewish education.
It was all prearranged. And
yes, and it was for money. I don't know who got the money, right? Somebody or a bunch of people got the payoff in the Ministry of Education. And I've known about this for 3 or 4 years. I've talked to many people about it. It's a criminal matter. No one will touch it. And we have a Likud minister now with whom I discussed this, and nothing. Of course, he has a legal advisor sitting over his head. So if he wished to do, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, if he wished to do something about it, it's doubtful whether he actually could have acted on it.
I don't know the man personally. We're talking about Minister Curry, but Shlomo Curry is his name.
Fish.
Head of the education ministry?
Former Air Force officer.
The minister of
Yoav Kish, the Minister of Education.
So maybe I'm confusing the two people.
Anyway,
I don't know that personally.
I know him personally.
But there's no question that with the best
he's a very fine man. He's a patriot. He's a fine gentleman.
With the best of intentions, they are stymied. They cannot do anything because of legal advisor. This is the system that was created by the junta.
Correct. And I have no doubt that he did look into it and he tried to do something and was stymied both by the legal advisor and by the bureaucracy. Again, the deep state. So getting back to these 11 students, the only thing I can say is I hope that the people, perhaps, who are listening to this broadcast will pick up the phone or walk into the Knesset and talk to an MK, it doesn't matter which one, and just say they won't stand for this. Those 11 terrorist supporters must not be allowed back into our schools. They must not. And that those people in the Ministry of Education that authorize their demand to be readmitted to the schools should be fired. Plain and simple. We don't need them. They're not playing for our side. I'll put it that way. They're playing for the other side.
There can be no doubt about that.